Imagine you're looking out the window and this is what you see. A pair of thieves nonchalantly bringing a car jack and a reciprocating saw to your driveway to steal something from your car. As they slip underneath the undercarriage of your car, a feeling of dread fills your soul as you realize what's happening. You heard of this before in the news. Your catalytic converter is about to be stolen. The converter, which is one of the most easily accessible parts of your car, is an essential component to all modern-day cars. And to find out more about what they do, I went to F&A Auto Sales to talk to a mechanic of theirs. So, can you tell me what a catalytic converter is and what it does?
Catalytic converter is the part of the car that turns toxic gases and pollutants into exhaust gas.
After our interview, I was able to get my hands on one of the catalytic converters to observe it close up. I could clearly see the interior honeycomb design coated in a catalyst, the substance that causes the reaction with the gases to occur. Precious metals like palladium, rhodium, and platinum are often used as the catalyst because they are good oxidizing agents. They are arranged in a honeycomb pattern to expose the maximum surface area of the catalyst to the reactants while also using the minimum amount of catalyst. Unfortunately, the rising prices of these metals can make catalytic converters an appealing target for thieves. Crimes have increased a lot over the last few years, as much as 5,000% in some states, since these metals can sell for a lot, each going for about $30 to $70 per gram, and there are about 3 to 7 grams of them in a catalytic converter. The repair cost for theft is not cheap, ranging between $2,500 and $5,000 for the owner to replace. It's a shame that they're stolen because the catalytic converters are the most important regulators of toxic emissions in our cars, turning 98% of the harmful fumes produced by your car, like nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, and hydrocarbons, into less harmful substances like carbon dioxide and water vapor through a series of chemical reactions. To see how it does this, let's take a deeper dive into the chemistry of a catalytic converter. In the first part of the reaction, platinum and rhodium attract the oxygen atoms in nitrogen oxides, separating the oxygen, resulting in the nitrogen being expelled as N2 and oxygen being released as O2. If you look at this as a redox reaction, you can see that the nitrogen atom decreases its oxidation number, meaning it gets reduced, gaining electrons, while the oxygen atom increases its oxidation number, meaning it gets oxidized, losing electrons. Next, platinum and palladium bind oxygen from the exhaust system and oxygen from the previous step to carbon monoxide to produce CO2, a relatively harmless gas. Oxygen is gaining electrons, so it gets reduced. Carbon is losing electrons, so it gets oxidized. It also adds oxygen to any unburnt hydrocarbons passing through to create CO2 and water vapor, also relatively harmless gases. Oxygen is gaining electrons, so it gets reduced. Carbon is losing electrons, so it gets oxidized. I also wanted to add that the metals in the reaction, platinum, rhodium, and palladium, are catalysts, meaning they don't actually get used up in the reaction, but they do lower the activation energy of the reaction in order for it to occur faster and more spontaneously than if there was no catalyst. The absence of this essential component to all cars can produce devastating consequences for both humans and the environment. Nitrogen oxides include nitrogen dioxide, nitric acid, nitrous oxide, nitrates, and nitric oxide. These molecules, when reacted with organic compounds in the air, form smog, which has adverse effects on the lungs. If nitrogen oxides react with sulfur dioxide, it produces acid rain, which can damage trees, plants, cars, buildings, and sculptures, and can pollute lakes to make them unsuitable for aquatic life. Nitrous oxide in particular also contributes significantly to climate change since it is one of the worst greenhouse gases, 300 times more potent than carbon dioxide. If we breathe in carbon monoxide, it can be extremely dangerous, even fatal. Hemoglobin, the iron-containing transporter of oxygen found in the blood, actually has a much higher affinity for carbon monoxide than it does for oxygen. So if you breathe in carbon monoxide, your hemoglobin binds to carbon monoxide instead of oxygen. leaving little to no room for oxygen to be carried to the cells of your body. This binding affinity is 200 to 300 times more with carbon monoxide than with oxygen. This has to do with the polarity of each molecule. When looking at diatomic oxygen, we can see that there is symmetry in the molecule, with two of the same atoms binding to each other, ensuring there will be no permanent dipoles. On the other hand, for carbon monoxide, there is an obvious dissymmetry in the molecule, and since oxygen is more electronegative than carbon, this dissymmetry leads to a permanent dipole. From this, we can tell that the carbon monoxide will be polar and more likely to bind to the iron in hemoglobin, since iron is a cation and would attract the negative oxygen in CO. And since the oxygens in O2 are already fairly stable and nonpolar, it would be less likely to bind to the iron in hemoglobin. This is not good for us, since our blood will be carrying carbon monoxide instead of oxygen gas, leading to low blood oxygen levels and low levels of oxygen in our tissues, which can lead to a multitude of health problems and even death. Hydrocarbons are just as dangerous as the other compounds. If they react with nitrogen oxides in sunlight, they can produce smog. If inhaled, hydrocarbons can cause birth defects, central nervous system impairments, cardiovascular problems, and even death. Catalytic converters are required to be installed in all modern-day cars for a reason, because they work. Since being mandated for all U.S. cars and trucks in 1975, American emission pollutants have decreased an average of 70%, as evidenced by the air quality in major cities from pre-catalytic converter days to now. The theft of catalytic converters is absolutely unacceptable. It causes a significant financial headache for the owner of the car to try to replace it, and will release toxic gases if they try to drive without one. So for the good of everyone, tell your local congresspeople to take action to stop catalytic converter theft now.